Welcome to the book of Micah. But let's fast forward for a moment, and I want to ask you to imagine what it would have been like to be one of the wise men. You know, they traveled hundreds of miles to Jerusalem to pay homage and to see Israel's newborn king. And when they got to Jerusalem, they expected there to be parades and celebration, joy in the city. However, instead, they were greeted by a group of grumpy religious professionals who told them that the Messiah was not to be born in Jerusalem, but in Bethlehem, citing the book of Micah. Now, the prophet Micah, he prophesied to another group of grumpy religious professionals 700 years earlier. The opening line of the book of Micah tells us that he prophesied in the days of Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. Now, a couple other prophets prophesied to this same group of Judean kings, Isaiah and Hosea. However, those two prophets also prophesied to the king of Uzziah during his reign. So that makes Micah a little bit younger than Isaiah and Hosea. However, all three of these prophets are what we call the 8th century prophets. And this is an important group. They are the first of the writing prophets, and they prophesied during the late 700s BC. Now, this period was kind of a bit of a roller coaster in Israel's history. Come and take a look at the timeline that I hope we're becoming familiar with. Let me zoom out a bit here. So here on the left are kings of Judah, kings of Israel. And if we zoom in here, there's our buddy Micah prophesying primarily to Judah. And there's his contemporaries, Isaiah and Hosea. And you see that during this period, we have these long reigns of Uzziah and Jeroboam II. And this was a period, this was a golden age in Israel and Judah's history, very prosperous, due to the fact that Assyria was very weak during this time and couldn't interfere in the land of Israel. Following this, however, in the year 745 BC, the sleeping giant of Assyria is going to wake up with the reign of Tiglath-Pileser III. And let's take a look at this map again. So at the beginning of Tiglath-Pileser's reign in 745, Assyria's empire was kind of this ugly brown blob. But as Tiglath began to expand, it grew to this ugly green blob and got closer and closer to Israel and Judah. Now, just a few years, 22 years, I think, 23 years after Tiglath-Pileser takes the throne, Israel is going to be destroyed and exiled, and Judah is going to be just decimated. Now, we know that, I'm sure you remember, Israel's downfall took place in the year 722, so kind of smack dab in the middle here of Micah's prophetic career. This is kind of a rough estimate. And Judah's decimation happened about 20 years after that. They barely survived the Assyrian assault. You remember that story of Hezekiah I think it's in 2 Kings 18, where the Assyrian army is going to surround the city of Jerusalem, and they're going to write up a formal threat and hand it over to the king. And Hezekiah is going to read that threat, and he's going to be so terrified, but he's going to bring it into the house of the Lord and lay it before Yahweh, and he's going to pray, Lord, save us. And that's exactly what Yahweh's going to do. He's going to miraculously deliver the city of Jerusalem. 185,000 Assyrian soldiers are going to die, and all this takes place in the year 701. Now, we're told of the prophet Isaiah's participation in this event in the book of Kings. However, 100 years later, roughly, the prophet Jeremiah, or at least his book, is going to teach us of Micah's involvement in this critical deliverance of Jerusalem as well. So let's take a look at the book of Jeremiah and how it references the prophet Micah. So poor buddy Jeremiah, he was not very popular. It seemed like everybody was out to kill the guy. The priests and the prophets of Judah said, "This man deserves the sentence of death because Jeremiah, prophesied against this city." Now, he's not the only prophet to do that. However, there were some important exceptions to Jeremiah's general unpopularity. It seems that some officials and people said, no, this man does not deserve the sentence of death. And then a certain group of elders, perhaps from Moresheth, they arose, spoke to all the people and said, "Hey, do you guys remember Micah of Moresheth? He prophesied way back in the days of Hezekiah. And you remember what he said? He said that Zion was going to be plowed as a field, just leveled, brought to the ground. Jerusalem would become a heap of ruins, the mountain of the house of the Lord, a wooded height." Now, this is a direct quote from the book of Micah, chapter 3, verse 12. And how was Hezekiah going to respond to these elders referencing Micah, who prophesied the destruction of Jerusalem? Well, did Hezekiah put Micah to death? No, he didn't. Remember, Hezekiah feared Yahweh. He repented. He entreated Yahweh's favor. And as a result, Yahweh relented of the disaster that he pronounced against them. He nahamed of the raw. So, way to go, Micah. Good job, buddy. However, what else do we learn then about the prophetic career of Micah from Jeremiah 26? You see, Micah's message, we learn, was one of judgment. Judgment and condemnation against Israel and primarily Judah's idolatry and injustice. Injustice is a huge issue in the book of Micah. And 3 times he's going to call Israel and he's going to say, "Hear, O house of Israel, the indictment of Yahweh against you." And it's actually from this word here, Shema, you remember in the Hebrew, that we get the book's primary structural divisions. The book of Micah is divided into 3 sections. Let's jump into the book and see how it's divided using this word Shema. So here's the opening superscription, and then we have the first call to Israel for them to hear, for them to Shema, all you peoples. Then down in chapter 3, "Hear, you heads of Jacob, rulers of the house of Israel, the indictment of the Lord." And in chapter 6, "Hear what Yahweh says. Arise and plead your case before the mountains." However, Micah's message is not one of judgment exclusively. Each of these major sections in Micah is going to begin with accusations and condemnations against Israel and Judah's idolatry and injustice, but it's going to conclude with hope, with a section of restoration and promise for the future of Israel and Judah. So we have judgment, and restoration. Now we're going to dive into the book of Micah and hear some of his warnings of judgment next.